There's a video that circulated widely several years ago. A dog in Argentina named Capitan. His owner died in 2006. The family buried the man, and the following morning, Capitan was gone. They searched the neighborhood, checked the usual spots. Nothing. A week passed. Then someone called from the cemetery. Capitan was there, sitting directly on the grave. He had never visited that cemetery once during his owner's lifetime. Nobody could explain how he located it. No trail of scent that anyone could reconstruct. No one who could have led him. And for the next 11 years, until Capitan himself died, he returned to that grave every single night. Most scientists, if you ask them directly, will tell you that dogs don't love. Not in the way the word implies. They form attachments. They recognize specific faces. They respond to reinforcement, to patterns of reward and safety. What looks, from the outside, like devotion is actually a cluster of conditioned behaviors shaped over thousands of years of co-evolution with humans. That's the official position. Measured, careful, appropriately skeptical. But Capitan received nothing from that grave. No food, no warmth, no safety signal of any kind. The owner was gone. The reinforcement loop was severed. And yet the behavior didn't extinguish. It continued, every night, for over a decade. So maybe the question isn't whether animals are capable of love. Maybe the question is whether we've been asking it from entirely the wrong direction. Start with the chemistry. Oxytocin is the molecule most tightly associated with love and social bonding in humans. When a mother holds her newborn for the first time, oxytocin floods her system. When two people fall into the early, consuming phase of romantic love, oxytocin is deeply involved. When you feel so close to another person that the thought of losing them produces something close to physical pain, that sensation has a molecular substrate, and oxytocin is doing substantial work inside it. Here's what makes that significant. Every mammal on Earth produces the same molecule. Not an analogous version, not a functional equivalent, the same one. When a mother elephant makes contact with her calf using her trunk, oxytocin levels spike in both animals simultaneously. When rats engage in extended play with familiar companions, oxytocin rises. Prairie voles, small, unremarkable rodents found across North American grasslands, are one of the few mammal species that form lifelong monogamous pair bonds. In controlled laboratory settings, researchers discovered something remarkable. Block the oxytocin receptors in a prairie vole's brain, and the pair bond dissolves. The animals stop seeking each other out. The preference disappears. Restore receptor function, and the attachment returns. You can toggle their bond on and off like a switch, because the mechanism is chemical, and the chemical is ancient. In 2016, researchers at Emory University extended this further, finding oxytocin-like compounds influencing social behavior in fish. Not mammals, fish. Animals with nervous systems so remote from ours that drawing behavioral comparisons feels almost absurd. And yet the same molecular architecture for social cohesion appears there too. Evolution kept this system across hundreds of millions of years of diverging life forms. Whatever it's doing something that survival apparently requires. Whatever love is at its biological foundation, the machinery for it is not uniquely human. We share it with thousands of other species. Elephants are the hardest case to dismiss. When an elephant dies, the herd's response is not simply to move on. They gather. They go still. They use their trunks to touch the body, gently, slowly, sometimes for hours. Researchers have documented herds returning to the location of a dead member's bones months later, sometimes years later, standing over the remains in sustained silence. The behavior serves no obvious survival function. There is nothing to eat, no threat to assess. They simply stand there, in what every observable measure suggests is something close to grief. Cynthia Moss spent more than 40 years studying elephant behavior at Amboseli National Park in Kenya. Over those decades, she documented a mother named Tony who, after losing her calf, carried the small body for 4 consecutive days, walking at reduced pace, setting the calf down periodically, then lifting it again. Reluctant, by every behavioral measure, to release it, she watched another elephant, Echo, mourn the death of her daughter for weeks, losing condition, falling behind the herd's normal movement patterns, returning repeatedly to the site of the death. Not because there was anything useful there. Just returning. Then there is the account of Lawrence Anthony, a conservationist in South Africa who spent years working to rehabilitate a herd of deeply traumatized wild elephants at his private reserve. The animals had been badly damaged by human contact before arriving, and the process of rebuilding their trust took years of patient, careful, close proximity. By most accounts, they came to trust him completely. In March 2012, Anthony died suddenly at his home. Within days, two separate elephant herds, who had been ranging deep in the bush, with no obvious way of receiving information about his death, walked for approximately 12 hours through the reserve to reach his house. They stood outside for 2 full days. Then they left. His family had no explanation. The elephants simply came. You can call that coincidence. You can call it a triggered response to some environmental cue nobody has identified yet. But at a certain threshold, the explanation begins to require more elaborate construction than the thing you're watching. Birds complicate the picture further, because birds are distant from us in ways that make their behavior harder to explain away. Albatrosses mate for life. They spend months, sometimes longer, traveling separately across thousands of miles of open ocean, completely apart. Then they find each other again. When they reunite after extended separation, they perform a greeting ritual, a specific, intricate sequence of vocalizations and physical movements that is unique to each bonded pair. A sequence they originally developed together when they first formed their bond, often years prior. They remember it. After all that distance, all that time, they come back to it. Like a couple returning to a private language no one else speaks. Gibbons sing. Every morning, a bonded pair climbs to the highest point in the forest canopy and performs a duet that can last up to an hour. The male's part and the female's part interlock precisely, filling in each other's gaps. Scientists classify these vocalizations as pair bonding displays and territorial announcements, which is accurate as far as it goes. But the songs are genuinely complex. Young gibbons spend years developing the ability to harmonize with a specific partner before the duet becomes fluent. You don't invest years learning the contours of another individual's voice simply to satisfy a biological checkbox. And ravens. Ravens form long-term social bonds that researchers, after extensive study, now describe using the word friendship, without quotation marks. They console companions after social conflicts. They maintain grudges across time. They demonstrate what, by behavioral criteria, looks clearly like loyalty, defending specific individuals in group conflicts even when the personal cost outweighs the apparent benefit. Choosing, repeatedly, to spend proximity time with specific ravens they prefer. That is a preference. It persists across contexts. It influences decisions. At what point does a persistent, cross-contextual preference for a specific individual stop being instinct and start being something else? Here's where it becomes philosophically uncomfortable. Consider the cichlid, a species of freshwater fish. Cichlids form pair bonds and co-parent their young together. The male and female coordinate egg guarding shifts. They take turns foraging and watching. When researchers experimentally separated bonded pairs, both fish exhibited elevated stress hormones and behavioral disruption. When reunited, the disruption resolved and normal coordinated behavior resumed. A cichlid's brain is approximately the size of a grain of rice. Whatever is happening inside it is not longing in any literary sense. But it is preference for a specific individual. It is measurably different behavior when that individual is absent. The question of where exactly that ends and love begins, neuroscience does not currently have a clean answer to that question, which forces a harder admission. Our entire framework for understanding love was constructed around the human experience of it. The interiority, the conscious quality of longing, the felt sense of connection and loss. We assume that other species lack access to those dimensions because they cannot communicate them to us.
But consider what a hypothetical outside observer would conclude about humans if they were limited to behavioral data and neurochemical measurements. If the felt experience of love were simply not accessible to them. They would document pair bonding, attachement formation, oxytocin dynamics, separation distress, reunion behavior. They would measure everything love does, and they would still face an unbridgeable gap where the subjective experience lives. The problem of other minds is difficult enough between two humans who share the same neurological architecture and the same language. Between a human and a crow, it may be genuinely unsolvable. Crows remember individual human faces. If a person acts cruelly toward a crow, and researchers have tested this deliberately using specific face masks, the crow will remember that face for years. It will communicate threat information about that face to other crows. A mob forms. The harassment continues long after the original incident, but the reverse is equally documented. Treat a crow consistently well, feed it over time, interact with it without threat, and some crows will bring things to that person. Small objects, bottle caps, buttons, fragments of glass, occasionally something that appears to have been specifically selected. Researchers have documented this behavior. The crows receive no training, no reward for bringing objects. Nobody teaches them to do it. They simply bring things to people who are kind to them. There is a word for voluntarily giving someone something with no expectation of return, purely because you want to. We don't usually reserve that word for fish or insects. We might be wrong to reserve it so narrowly. Dolphins have been observed sustaining injured or ill companions for days, swimming alongside them, positioning themselves to help the compromised animal reach the surface to breathe, remaining present with no apparent benefit to themselves. Chimpanzees adopt orphan young from outside their immediate family group, unrelated infants. Sometimes the adoptive animal is a young male with no reproductive investment in the infant and no prior caretaking experience. He carries the infant. He protects it. Evolutionary biology does not have a fully satisfying account of why. So perhaps the original question was never quite right. Perhaps the question was never whether animals love. Perhaps the question is what love actually is. If love is a neurochemical bonding process shaped by evolutionary pressures to support cooperation, reproduction, and group cohesion, then the answer is straightforward. Animals love. The chemistry is conserved across species. The behaviors are parallel. The outcomes are functionally identical. If love is something beyond that, something experiential and subjective that only humans can access, then we face a problem because we have no method to verify that claim in animals. But we also have no method to verify it in other humans. We take it on faith, extended from our own interior experience. What we can say with confidence is narrower and stranger than either position. A dog found a cemetery it had never visited and spent 11 years sleeping on a specific grave. An elephant mother walked for 4 days carrying a body she could not release. 2 wild herds traveled through the night to stand outside the house of a man who had been kind to them. An albatross crossed thousands of miles of open water and, upon finding its partner again, remembered exactly how their song goes. We have been watching this for as long as we've lived alongside other animals. We keep reaching for a word large enough to hold what we're seeing. We haven't found it yet.